The vast meeting chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as the holographic display showed yet another video from Earth. The alien representatives watched in horror as a human child giggled, hugging what they recognized as one of the most dangerous predators on the newly discovered planet, a large canine descended from wolves. "This cannot be real," declared Head Counselor Gray, his thin frame trembling slightly. Like most of the council species, his people had evolved from prey animals, with large eyes and quick reflexes built for running away from danger. These humans are letting their young embrace death itself. The Earth ambassador, Robert Miller, tried not to smile. He had spent the last 3 hours showing the council various examples of human interaction with Earth's wildlife. Each video seemed to shock them more than the last. "I assure you, counselors, what you're seeing is quite common on Earth. Dogs, these descendants of wolves, are our companions. We've lived alongside them for thousands of years." The chamber erupted in worried whispers. A representative from the hive worlds, her antennae twitching nervously, raised her voice. "But we have studied Earth's wolves. They are pack hunters with sharp teeth and powerful jaws. How did your species survive such madness?" Miller touched a control panel, and the hologram changed to show various scenes from human history. Cave paintings of humans hunting alongside wolves, Egyptian hieroglyphs showing cats being worshipped, and modern scenes of people working with horses, falcons, and even traditionally feared creatures like snakes and spiders. "You see," Miller explained, using the simplest terms he could find, "humans learned long ago that we could form bonds with other species. We didn't just run from predators. We studied them, understood them, and eventually learned to work with them. It's a key part of how we survived and grew as a species." Another counselor, his scales shifting color with anxiety, spoke up. "We have reports that humans keep venomous serpents in their living spaces as pets, for entertainment." "That's correct," Miller nodded. "With proper understanding and respect, even creatures others consider deadly can become fascinating companions. We've learned that most animals aren't simply mindless killing machines. They have behaviors, patterns, and intelligence of their own." The head counselor raised his hands for silence as the chamber once again filled with shocked conversations. "Ambassador Miller, you must understand our concern. In all our years of space exploration, we have never encountered a species that willingly coexists with predators. Most civilized races eliminated or strictly contained their world's dangerous creatures before achieving spaceflight. It was considered a mark of progress." Miller walked to the center of the chamber, pulling up a new hologram. This one showed a human search and rescue team working with dogs to find survivors after a disaster, horses helping farm work, and dolphins assisting with underwater operations. "What you see as madness, we see as one of our greatest strengths," Miller explained. "By working with these animals instead of against them, we gained partners, helpers, protectors. The same instincts that make them dangerous also make them incredibly useful when properly trained and respected." The council members watched in fascination as the images continued to play. A blind human walking confidently with a guide dog, a police officer and his canine partner tracking down criminals, a therapy animal bringing comfort to sick children. "Perhaps," the head counselor said slowly, his initial fear giving way to curiosity, "there is something to learn from this unusual approach. Though I must admit, the thought of being in the same room as one of these dogs still fills me with dread." Miller smiled warmly. "That's perfectly understandable. Fear of predators is natural. What makes humans different isn't a lack of fear. It's our ability to move past that fear through understanding. We respect these creatures for what they are, and in return, they help us in ways we never expected." As the first official meeting between Earth and the Galactic Council drew to a close, none of the alien representatives could have predicted how humanity's unique ability to work with predatory species would soon become crucial to the survival of galactic civilization itself. Captain Tom Reed walked through the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council's main space station, his boots making soft clicks against the polished floor. At his side trotted Max, his German shepherd, drawing terrified looks from every alien they passed. Some pressed themselves against the walls, while others quickly ducked into side corridors to avoid them. Just another day at the office. Oh, boy. Tom patted Max's head, earning a happy tail wag from his four-legged partner. After 6 months of working as Earth's security advisor to the Council, he had gotten used to these reactions. What he couldn't get used to was how the aliens seemed to fear everything with sharp teeth. As they approached the security command center, alarms suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashed, and Tom watched as alien security officers rushed past him, giving his dog an extra-wide berth despite the emergency. Captain Reed called out Officer Blue, one of the few aliens who had started to adjust to working with humans. Like most council species, he resembled a prey animal, with large eyes and a slender build. We have an escaped specimen from the Xenobiology lab. Level 3, Section B. Tom straightened up. Dangerous. Very. It's a juvenile razor beast from the outer colonies. Small but extremely aggressive. Our containment teams can't get near it. What does it look like? Similar to what you call a big cat, but with armored scales and venomous spikes along its spine. Blue explained, keeping one eye nervously on Max. It's already injured 3 security officers. Tom smiled. This was exactly why the Council had started hiring human security advisors. Come on, Max. Let's go to work. They took the lift to Level 3, where panicked scientists and security personnel were huddled at both ends of a long corridor. In the middle, they could hear growling and the sound of metal being scratched. Tom pulled out a small device from his pocket, a basic scanner that showed heat signatures. The razor beast was hiding inside an air vent, probably scared and defensive in the unfamiliar environment. Everyone stay back, Tom ordered. He unclipped Max's standard service vest and replaced it with a special reinforced one designed for dangerous encounters. Then he pulled out something that made Officer Blue gasp, a large piece of synthetic meat. You're not going to try to feed it, are you? Blue asked in horror. First rule of handling predators, Tom explained calmly. They're usually most aggressive when they're scared or hungry. This little guy is probably both. Tom moved forward slowly, Max following at a perfect heel. He could see the razor beast now, about the size of a mountain lion, with metallic-looking scales and a row of sharp spines down its back. Its red eyes tracked their every movement. Easy there, big fella, Tom said softly, using the same soothing tone that worked with nervous earth animals. The creature's head tilted slightly at his voice. Nobody's going to hurt you. He tossed the meat halfway between them. The razor beast's nostrils flared, but it didn't move. Max, show our friend it's safe, Tom commanded. Max carefully approached the meat, took a small bite, then backed away. This was a technique they'd developed for dealing with suspicious alien creatures. If another predator showed the food was safe, they were more likely to trust it. The razor beast watched intently, then slowly crept forward. It reminded Tom of working with big cats back on Earth. The same careful movements, the same predatory grace. As it ate, Tom got his first good look at it. There was a small cut on one of its legs, probably from its escape attempt. See that injury, Max? Tom whispered. That's why it's extra scared. While the creature was focused on eating, Tom pulled out a medical spray designed for treating alien wildlife. He'd learned long ago that helping an injured animal was the fastest way to earn its trust. The razor beast tensed when Tom stepped closer, but it didn't run. 10 minutes later, Tom was carefully spraying the healing solution on its leg while the creature purred. Actually purred, contentedly. Officer Blue and his team watched in amazement from the end of the corridor. I don't believe it, Blue muttered. That beast nearly took off Sergeant Green's arm an hour ago. Tom stood up slowly, giving the razor beast a final pat. Like I keep telling you all, there's no such thing as a bad animal, just scared ones. Once you understand that, half the battle is won. The razor beast let them lead it back to its enclosure without any trouble. As they secured the door, Tom heard Officer Blue talking into his communicator. "Send a message to the council. The humans did it again. Maybe we should start taking their advice about predator handling more seriously." The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council began with screams of panic. On the main view screen, another trading ship exploded into pieces, torn apart by massive shapes that glowed with an eerie blue light. These were the Ravagers, space-dwelling creatures that had suddenly appeared 3 months ago and were now destroying everything in their path. "That's the 4th ship this week," Head Counselor Gray announced, his voice shaking. "The Ravagers are getting bolder. They're now attacking our largest cargo vessels." The council chamber erupted in frightened voices. Representatives from 20 different species all tried to speak at once. Their fear was understandable. The Ravagers were unlike anything they had seen before. Officer Blue stood up, activating a holographic display. "Our latest scans show the creatures are growing larger. The first ones we spotted were the size of small shuttles. Now they're as big as cruise ships." He pointed to the blurry images captured by surviving vessels. "They seem to feed on our ship's energy sources, but they destroy the entire vessel to get to it." The council watched as another recording played. The Ravagers looked like giant manta rays made of shifting light and dark metal. They moved through space with surprising grace for their size, their wing-like fins rippling as they surrounded their prey. "Our weapons are useless," a military commander reported. His battle-scarred ship had barely escaped an encounter with the beasts. Their outer shell absorbs energy weapons, and physical projectiles bounce off. It's like they were designed to be perfect ship killers. Tom Reed sat quietly in the human section, watching the aliens panic. Next to him, Max sensed his tension and pressed closer. The dog's presence gave him an idea. "Has anyone tried studying their behavior?" Tom asked, standing up. The chamber fell silent. "Not as enemies, but as animals." "They're monsters, not animals," someone shouted from the back. "Everything is an animal of some kind," Tom replied calmly. He walked to the center of the chamber and took control of the display. "Look at their attack patterns. They move in groups, like a wolf pack. They coordinate their attacks. They protect their younger members." He highlighted different sections of the footage. "See how they communicate with flashes of light, and how they always approach from the same angle. That's learned behavior. They're teaching their hunting techniques to each other." Head Counselor Gray frowned. "What difference does it make? They're still killing our people and destroying our ships." "It makes all the difference," Tom insisted. "If they're animals, they can be understood. If they can be understood, maybe they can be dealt with without fighting." "You suggest we try to tame space monsters?" Officer Blue asked, but his tone was thoughtful. He had seen how humans handled dangerous creatures. Tom shook his head. "Not tame. Understand? Look at this footage again. They don't attack ships at random. They go after the ones with the strongest energy signatures. What if they're not trying to destroy our ships? What if they're just hungry?" The chamber grew quiet as the council considered this. Tom continued, "On Earth, when predators attack human settlements, it's usually because we've either invaded their territory or they're desperate for food. We've learned to solve these problems by understanding why they're happening." "And how exactly do you suggest we understand creatures that live in the vacuum of space?" the military commander asked skeptically. "The same way humans have always studied dangerous animals," Tom replied. "Carefully, respectfully, and with the understanding that every creature has its reasons for what it does." He turned to address the entire council. "Let me put together a team. Not soldiers, but people who understand predator behavior, beast masters, animal behaviorists, marine biologists who've worked with deep-sea creatures." Head Counselor Gray shared looks with the other council members. They had already tried everything else. Their most powerful weapons had failed. Their fastest ships couldn't outrun the Ravagers. Perhaps it was time for a different approach. "Very well, Captain Reed," Gray said finally. "You have 1 month to show us some progress. After that, if the attacks haven't stopped, we'll have no choice but to abandon the outer trading routes entirely." Tom nodded, already making plans, as he left the chamber with Max at his side. He knew this would be humanity's greatest test yet. They had learned to work with Earth's most dangerous creatures. Now they would have to prove they could do the same with monsters from the stars. Dr. Alice Walker stood at the window of Research Station 7, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, a pack of Ravagers was moving through space, searching for their next meal. While others saw monsters, she saw something different. Animals trying to survive. The door slid open behind her. "Dr. Walker, the observation pod is ready," said her assistant, Mike, checking something on his tablet. "Though I still think you're crazy for wanting to get this close to them." Alice smiled, turning away from the window. The observation pod was her design. A small craft built to study the Ravagers up close. Unlike normal ships, it had minimal energy output and a special outer shell that mimicked the Ravagers' own biometallic skin. "Sometimes you have to be a little crazy to make progress," she said, walking toward the preparation room. That's what everyone told Jane Goodall when she went to study chimps in the wild. The preparation room was filled with specialized equipment. Alice put on her modified spacesuit, designed to let her move easily while protecting her from both vacuum and the Ravagers' natural electrical fields. The suit was painted with patterns similar to young Ravagers, based on recordings they'd studied. "The Council's giving us one chance at this," Mike reminded her as he helped check her suit seals. "If anything goes wrong, they'll shut down the whole program." "Then nothing can go wrong," Alice replied simply. She had spent 3 weeks studying every piece of footage they had of the Ravagers. She had spotted patterns that others missed, the way they used light signals to communicate, how they always kept their young in the center of the group, how they seemed to play with each other between hunts. The observation pod was tiny compared to normal space vessels. It looked almost organic, its outer shell covered in sensors and specialized cameras. As Alice strapped herself in, she reviewed her plan one more time. "Remember," she said into her comm, "no rescue attempts if something goes wrong. Any sudden energy spikes will just attract more of them." She had made everyone promise this. The worst thing they could do was scare the Ravagers with a show of force. The pod launched smoothly from the station. Their sensors had detected a small group of Ravagers nearby, following a common trade route. Alice guided her pod toward their predicted path, keeping her energy emissions as low as possible. "Contact in 5 minutes," Mike's voice crackled through the comm. "Are you sure about this?" "Trust me," Alice replied. "They're not mindless killers. Look at how carefully they take apart ships. They're trying to get to the power cores with minimal energy waste. That shows intelligence." The first Ravager appeared in her view screen. A juvenile, about half the size of a normal cargo ship. Its skin rippled with patterns of light, and its fin-like wings moved gracefully through space. It was beautiful in a dangerous sort of way. Alice activated her pod's special feature, a system designed to copy the Ravagers' light patterns. She had spent days analyzing their signals, trying to understand their basic communication. Now she would test her theories. The young Ravager noticed her pod and moved closer. Alice held her breath. The creature was close enough now that she could see the intricate patterns in its biometallic skin, the way its eyes glowed with internal light. She sent out a simple pattern, one she had seen young Ravagers use when approaching larger adults. The creature paused, then responded with its own flash of lights. It was communicating. "Dr. Walker." Mike's voice was tense. 3 more Ravagers approaching, adult size. "Good," Alice said calmly, though her heart was racing. "That's exactly what we want. They're coming to check on the young one." The adult Ravagers were enormous up close, their wingspans wider than cruise ships. They surrounded her pod, but didn't attack. Instead, they began exchanging light patterns with each other and the juvenile. "They're curious," Alice reported, carefully documenting every pattern. "They recognize this pod is different from normal ships. See how they're studying it. This proves they don't attack blindly. They're capable of investigating new things. As the Ravagers continued to examine her pod, Alice smiled. This was just the beginning, but it confirmed what she had suspected all along. These weren't mindless destroyers. They were intelligent creatures with their own form of communication and social structure. Now they just had to learn how to talk to them. 2 weeks after her first contact with the Ravagers, Dr. Alice Walker sat in her lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing hundreds of light patterns. Each one represented a different message she had recorded from the space creatures. Next to her, Mike was helping sort through the data. Look at this sequence. Alice pointed to one particular pattern. We see it every time before they feed. I think it's a kind of dinner bell, a way to tell the whole group that food is nearby. Mike nodded, marking the pattern in their growing dictionary of Ravager signals, like wolves howling to call the pack for a hunt. Exactly. Alice's eyes lit up with excitement. And here's the interesting part. They have a different signal they use around their young. It's like they're teaching them how to hunt safely. Their research station had become a hub of activity. Scientists from Earth had brought in all sorts of equipment normally used to study ocean animals. The similarities between Ravagers and Earth's deep-sea creatures were surprising. Both used light to communicate, both moved in three-dimensional space, and both had complex social structures. Dr. Walker, a young researcher, burst into the lab. You need to see this. The observation pod caught something amazing. They rushed to the viewing room, where a large screen showed new footage from their latest observation mission. A group of Ravagers was interacting with what looked like a giant space jellyfish, another species that lived in the void between stars. They're not hunting it, Alice noted, watching closely. They're playing with it. Look at how gentle they're being. The footage showed young Ravagers darting around the jellyfish, their light patterns shifting in what they now recognized as signs of excitement. The adult Ravagers watched carefully, occasionally sending out signals that seemed to warn the young ones when they got too rough. This changes everything, Mike said. They're not just mindless predators. They can tell the difference between food and other living things. They can choose not to attack. Alice was already taking notes. We need to adjust our approach. Instead of trying to stop them from attacking ships, we need to help them understand that ships aren't food, even though they contain energy. The next few days were filled with new discoveries. They learned that Ravagers had favorite hunting grounds, usually along busy trade routes where ships regularly passed. They discovered that the creatures could store energy in their bodies, like whales storing fat, which explained why they didn't need to attack ships constantly. Most importantly, they found out that Ravagers were incredibly intelligent. They used different light patterns for different members of their group, like names. They taught their young through demonstration and practice. They even had warning signals to tell other Ravagers about dangerous areas of space. The real breakthrough came when we started comparing them to dolphins, Alice explained to the research team during their daily meeting. Both species use complex signals to communicate. Both hunt in groups. Both show signs of what we call culture, learned behaviors passed down from adults to young. She pulled up a new display showing brain scans they'd managed to take of a young Ravager. Their brains are amazing. They have areas specifically designed to process energy fields and light patterns. They're not attacking ships because they're aggressive. They're attacking because their natural food sources must have been similar to our engine signatures. The team was quiet, taking in this information. One of the researchers finally spoke up. So how do we stop them from attacking ships? Alice smiled. We do what humans have always done when dealing with intelligent predators. We find a way to communicate with them, understand their needs, and offer them a better option than hunting our ships. She walked over to a different display showing a new design, a special energy buoy that would give off the same signature as their natural prey. We're not going to fight them or try to drive them away. We're going to help them. And in doing so, we'll turn what everyone sees as monsters into something else entirely. What's that? Mike asked. "Neighbors," Alice replied simply, "just like we did with wolves thousands of years ago. We'll show them there's more to gain from working with us than hunting us. And maybe, just maybe, we'll learn some amazing things from them along the way." The observation room of Research Station 7 was packed with people. Scientists, council representatives, and military officers all crowded around the main view screen. Dr. Alice Walker stood at the front, her heart pounding as she prepared to attempt something no one had ever tried before. "Begin Operation First Contact," she ordered. Outside in space, 20 special energy buoys activated, forming a large circle. Each buoy gave off energy signatures similar to the Ravager's natural prey. They had spent weeks perfecting the signal, making sure it would attract attention without seeming threatening. "Ravager group detected," Mike announced from his station. 5 adults, 3 juveniles. They're changing course to investigate the buoys." Alice watched as the massive creatures appeared on screen. Their biometallic skin rippled with light patterns that she could now read as easily as facial expressions. The adults were curious but cautious. The juveniles showed excitement. "Activate the communication array," Alice said quietly. The buoys began pulsing with light patterns, simple messages they had learned from watching young Ravagers. It was like speaking in baby talk, using the most basic form of their light language. "They're responding." Mike's voice was filled with excitement. "The juveniles are approaching the buoys." Everyone held their breath as the young Ravagers moved closer. Instead of tearing into the buoys like they did with ships, they began to play with them, pushing them back and forth with their fins. The adult Ravagers watched carefully but didn't interfere. "Now for Phase 2, Alice nodded to her team. The buoys slowly began to move, creating a path leading away from the busy trade route. The young Ravagers followed, fascinated by these new toys that spoke their language. The adults, after some hesitation, went with them. "It's working," someone whispered. "They're actually following the buoys." Alice allowed herself a small smile. This was exactly what she had hoped for. Like many Earth predators, Ravagers were naturally curious and intelligent. Give them something interesting enough, and they would choose to investigate rather than attack. The boys led the Ravager group to a special area they had prepared, a region of space filled with natural energy sources that the creatures could feed on. As soon as the Ravagers noticed the abundance of food, their light patterns changed to show excitement. "Look at that," Alice pointed to the screen. "They're teaching the juveniles how to feed on the natural energy sources. They prefer it to the artificial energy from our ships." The next few hours were amazing to watch. The Ravagers explored their new feeding ground, their light patterns showing contentment. The juveniles practiced collecting energy while the adults kept watch. It was like watching a family of wolves teaching their pups to hunt. "Send in the second wave," Alice ordered. More buoys activated, these ones programmed with more complex light patterns. They began a simple conversation with the adult Ravagers, using signals that meant friend and food and safe place. To everyone's amazement, the Ravagers responded. Their light patterns became more complex, trying to match the communication from the buoys. One of the adults even approached a buoy carefully and touched it with its fin, a gesture they had never seen before. "Dr. Walker," the head counselor's voice came from behind her. "It seems your crazy idea wasn't so crazy after all." Alice turned to face him. "This is just the beginning. Once we can communicate better, we can establish more feeding grounds like this one. We can teach them to recognize safe areas and dangerous ones. We can turn them from threats into allies." "Allies?" an admiral scoffed. "They're still dangerous creatures. So are the police dogs that protect our cities." Alice replied calmly. "So are the horses that carry our riders. So are the falcons that help our farmers. Being dangerous doesn't make something an enemy. Sometimes it makes them the perfect partner." As if to prove her point, one of the young Ravagers had started copying the boy's light patterns, like a child learning to speak. The adult Ravagers watched this with what could only be described as pride. We didn't need weapons or barriers, Alice said softly. We just needed to understand them. That's always been humanity's greatest strength, not our ability to fight predators, but our ability to understand them. 1 year after the first successful contact with the Ravagers, the main observation deck of Space Station 9 was hosting an unusual gathering. Dr. Alice Walker stood with a group of alien diplomats, watching through the reinforced windows as 3 massive Ravagers glided past, their biometallic skin gleaming in the starlight. It's still hard to believe, Head Counselor Gray said, shaking his head in wonder. A year ago, those creatures were destroying our ships. Now they're helping us map safe travel routes through deep space. Alice smiled as she watched Nova, their first trained Ravager, lead its group in a patrol pattern around the station. The creature's light patterns showed clear happiness, a signal they now understood well. Look at this, she said, activating a holographic display. In the past 6 months, ship attacks have dropped by 98%. We've established 28 feeding grounds along major trade routes, and the Ravagers actually help guide lost ships to safe paths. Mike, now the head of Ravager Communications, pulled up another display. The most interesting part is how they've started teaching each other. We only had to train a few groups. They spread the knowledge to others on their own. Through the window, they could see Nova teaching younger Ravagers how to scan ships without frightening them. The huge creature moved with surprising gentleness, its light patterns showing patience as the juveniles practiced. Remember how terrified everyone was when you first suggested trying to communicate with them? Officer Blue asked, watching the display. His species had evolved from prey animals, but even he had grown comfortable around their new allies. Fear comes from not understanding, Alice replied. That's true for any species. The Ravagers were just as scared of us at first. They thought our ships were strange creatures invading their feeding grounds. The group watched as Nova led its patrol past a cargo ship. Instead of attacking, the Ravagers escorted the vessel, using their natural ability to sense energy fields to guide it around a dangerous radiation storm. They're better at detecting space hazards than our best equipment, Tom Reed commented. He had joined them with Max, his German shepherd, who watched the Ravagers through the window with calm interest. Last week, a group of them warned one of our colony ships about a micro-meteor shower we hadn't even detected yet. Alice nodded. They've lived in space far longer than any of our species. They understand things about it that we're only beginning to learn. A young Ravager broke away from the group outside, moving closer to the window. It pressed one fin gently against the transparent barrier, sending out a complex pattern of lights, a greeting they had taught them, meaning friend. Watch this, Alice said, pressing a button. A panel on the station's hull lit up, returning the greeting pattern. The young Ravager's light pattern shifted to show joy, and it spun in a playful circle before rejoining its group. Hard to believe those are the same creatures that used to terrify the entire galaxy, Mike mused. They haven't changed, Alice corrected him. We have. We learned to see them as they really are, not monsters, not mindless destroyers, but intelligent beings we could understand and work with. Head Counselor Gray turned to address the gathered diplomats. The Council has learned a valuable lesson from humanity. Sometimes, what we fear most just needs to be understood. Their ability to connect with predatory species isn't reckless. It's a gift. One that has now changed the face of galactic travel forever. Outside, Nova's group was preparing to leave for their next patrol. Their light patterns flashed a farewell signal, another human teaching they had adopted and made their own. So what's next? Officer Blue asked. What other space creatures will humans try to understand? Alice smiled, watching the Ravagers disappear into the darkness of space. That's the beautiful thing about understanding predators. Once you learn how to do it, every scary creature becomes a potential friend. We just have to be patient enough to learn their language, brave enough to earn their trust, and wise enough to respect them for what they are. As if to emphasize her point, one last flash of light came from the departing Ravagers, a pattern that translated roughly to "see you soon." It was a promise of continued friendship between species that once feared each other, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous things in the universe just need to be understood.